First, I kind of summarize what you've said, and I've heard you say this before, is that, the Democrats don't have a Harris problem, they have a brand problem. What do you mean by that, and what can Harris do to overcome the brand problem?
Yeah. Basically, if you're in the United States, you get in a car and move away from an ocean for about 2 hours and then talk to people. And you will realize that people think the Democratic Party is a weak party. It is prioritizing people other than them. And they don't actually care about they don't actually care about not real people. They don't actually care about people who like make things for a living or take care of people for a living. They care about Wall Street and Silicon Valley. Um, and so if you look at Democratic voting trends among men without college degrees, white, black, brown, going back decades, really you see kind of a continual etching away of voters from that, of that voting block. And there has been articles the last couple of weeks like, is Harris in trouble with black men? And it's not fair to Harris because it's like, no, the Democrats are in trouble because, again, we are seen as a party that doesn't prioritize policies that affect, the average person. We're seen as a ideological, um, identity politics. We're viewed as an identity politics party, and a lot of like non-college men in particular never feel they're part of that identity that the party cares about.
So,
It's a little more complex than that, but just from a base form, that's the root of kind of the brand problem.
so Eminem introducing Obama tonight, your time in Michigan, helpful, harmful, or does it not matter?
This is where in Michigan it doesn't matter for anybody outside of Michigan, but like Trump is making a lot of headway with like angry white men in particular, angry young white men. You're seeing a huge 20 years ago, it's like, well, what's your skin color? That's going to determine like how you're going to vote. And then it was like, well, how much money do you make? Or, do you have a college degree? And while all of those still matter, gender is really this cycle, partly because of Dobbs, partly because of Trump, is really becoming I think, the real determinant factor on your voting preference. So you go to like, how does Trump win? He expands the amount of like disaffected or disengaged men without college degrees. And like, I was in high school in the late 90s. I consider myself, appreciative of Eminem's music. And like, if you're like a, 20 to 40-year-old like dude who, doesn't have a college degree and, doesn't have, good healthcare and stable income, that angstiness that Eminem speaks to, voters need permission. Like they need permission to like cast a ballot that they wouldn't normally cast. And Eminem, again, we're talking about like a North Detroit, we're talking a couple places, but in races that are decided by 20,000 votes, that's all I really care about. So yes, Eminem matters
Yes.
to a few thousand dudes in Detroit, and that matters.
All right, my last question, and Trishy, I'm going to let you kick off when after this one. So, kind of what's happening from an expat point of view, right? And we're going to talk about Trump and Trump voters, and are there persuadable Trump voters? So, kind of from an expat point of view, we are now seeing Republicans trying to keep expats from having the right to vote, and they're putting in lawsuits in swing states saying a vote from overseas shouldn't count because you don't prove your citizenship. So you have that move against expats, but at the same time, you have Trump saying, I'm going to get rid of double taxation for expats. And so you got, well, yeah, I might lose my right to vote, but boy, he's going to help my bottom line. I'm going to vote for him. That's kind of an expat. Is that what a lot of Americans are doing in saying, yeah, I don't care about this democracy stuff. I care about my taxes. I care about my pocketbook. And are those voters persuadable? And can Harris get those types of voters?
Yeah, so you're talking a little bit about like the former like Reagan Republican or like the boardroom conservative, I think is what, they would be called in like 2004, we would call them like a boardroom conservative. And though and where if you're a boardroom conservative, you maybe are more likely to have a college degree, and you're also probably more likely to have a wife or if you're a man, you have more likely to have a wife with a college degree, which means you've got some internal pressures to kind of keep you in check in terms of your voting. And so I think one of the things I appreciate the campaign is doing is they're bringing out people like Cheney here in the final couple weeks and talk about like permission. I think some of these boardroom conservatives need permission from another Republican that it's maybe okay to like abandon Trump because maybe he went too far this last couple times. So I do think that is something real. And when you talk about like suburban women, and I'm not pivoting on this conversation, but like suburban women, going back to like a Liz Cheney, again, it's giving permission to a Republican woman or a Republican leaning woman that it's okay this time to cast a vote for a Democrat. What I will also say, it's interesting that Trump and the Trump campaign have long criticized early voting and vote by mail, and they're doing that. And at the same time, they're also saying, make sure you vote early and like turn your ballot in. And so they have found themselves in some problems because they are discouraged a way to actually bank some votes early. And so you are seeing, no surprise, but the Trump and Trump campaign kind of saying one thing and doing the other.
Okay, my last question. What is Harris's pathway to victory?
Wisconsin, Michigan, and Pennsylvania.
And how does she get there? What does she have to do?
Yeah. So I think it is how it always is. And I ran campaigns in Ohio. And so while Ohio is not in play, at least for the presidency this year, it is you cut your losses. You can't lose counties, 25-75. You got to lose them 28, 72. And that like 3 or 4 point margin. And that's like your blue collar, that's where like, the Eminem kind of comes into play. It's cutting your losses a little bit there. We have to make sure that we don't slip with Black men and Hispanic men at the rate we have been. We're going to take more losses, but we have to make sure that it is a smaller drop off. I mean, if you're a Democrat, thank God for Black women, because like the most consistent regular voters, they bring their family with them, where when they can. Young women in Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, Michigan, suburban women, Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, Michigan, you go in Philly, Milwaukee, Madison, Detroit, you've got a lot of suburbs there and a lot of suburbs with college degrees. And then you drive home in these final couple days that you are not a socialist if you're Harris. And I know that sounds kind of silly, but like look at attack ads against her, and it's basically so she's a socialist and far left. And if we're able to improve among independents, another point or two that like she shares our values, she prioritizes policies that like affect my family, she's not extreme. That 1 or 2 or 3 point bump could make the difference in all these states.
Greg, thank you so much. That was, as always, amazing.